Okay. All right. I believe that we're recording now. Tonight we are going to probably finish up the lecture on the Senji Sho. That we're in the fourth part now, except for one part that I would like to cover separately 2 weeks from now, and that will be on shoju and shakabuku, these two terms that we tend to toss around here in Nichiren Buddhism when we talk about propagation and conversion. So tonight is probably going to be a little bit shorter than the past ones, and that's not always a bad thing. So let us go ahead and begin. We'll pick up where I left off last time, and let's see, I got my paperwork out of order here. We'll start with the refutation of the Zen school. So what Nichiren is doing here in this portion, we started last time with the Pure Land, and I won't repeat that. You can go back and look at the previous video. But what we're doing here is we're going through the different, Nichiren's view on all of the predominant Buddhist schools during his time. So we've taken, just as a quick overview, we've looked at the Lotus Sutra. We looked a little bit about how the Lotus Sutra spread to different countries, and in the course of that, I think that was the first lecture. In the course of that, we also talked a little bit about Buddhism spread in general, but we looked at how the Lotus Sutra worked its way to Japan. Then we went back and looked at the different time periods, this five sets of 500-year periods that is Nichiren talks about here in this particular writing. We look at those. We look at how they apply as a practice model for the different practice periods or the different types of practices of the Lotus Sutra throughout time, up until Nichiren's time. Then we looked at what type of practice was appropriate for a particular time period in a particular location. So Nichiren covers just about every aspect that you can think of the history of the Lotus Sutra, and also the propagation of the Lotus Sutra, and how the Lotus Sutra would be taught and viewed in each of the different time periods. And all of this is leading up to his countering of the argument that the Lotus Sutra is too difficult to be taught to people in this age of degeneration, this fifth 500-year period. Nichiren's contemporaries considered him to Nichiren's contemporaries felt that it was inappropriate to teach the Lotus Sutra during this time, that people would not understand it, they would slander it, and therefore make a bad cause for their future attainment of enlightenment. And Nichiren says, actually, that's the way it should be, that this Lotus Sutra is the most difficult, and we should not be surprised by that, because that's what it says in the Lotus Sutra itself. The Lotus Sutra itself says that it is the most difficult. And so Nichiren then begins to lay out his argument throughout the course of this writing, the different ways that he approaches the conclusion that the Lotus Sutra is the most appropriate teaching. I'm always amazed at the complex logic, if you will, that Nichiren employs in making his case, in defending his argument or his belief. He's very thorough. He doesn't rely on emotions, although he does write emotionally. He doesn't rely on beating you over the head with a false conclusion or with some emotional bombardment. He is not. He's not demeaning in any way, I do not believe. I feel that when I read his writings, I'm just, I'm able through his process to look at something from many, many different sides. It's almost as if Nichiren spent all of his time asking himself how this could be wrong, if there's any possible way that this could be incorrect, and frequently that's kind of the strategy that he employs in his writings. Is he offers up every argument that his contemporaries were offering, and finding things that he thought of himself, that he offered up every argument, and then countered that argument in his writing. And so sometimes it's a little bit confusing to read this, and I don't know about all the people who may be watching this at some point. Nichiren is very linear in a way. He's very logical. It goes from A to B to C to D, and so on and so forth. And many people don't relate that way. I know that, I've mentioned this before when I wrote my book on the Magic City, that Southern storytelling is different than Northern storytelling in the United States. African American storytelling techniques are different than European storytelling techniques, and those differ even from what's traditionally the way a story is traditionally structured in Asia as well. In the South, in the Southern culture in the United States, storytelling is much more circular. It sort of rambles around all over the place, and it goes back and forth and weaves in and out. And this is also, I think, traditional in African and African American storytelling structure. That it's not so linear. You're just not going from point A to point B, but you're going from A and a half to B and a half, and A back to A and a half again, and just kind of all over the place. It's a very circular approach to storytelling. Sort of wander around for a long time before you get to the point. For some people, that's very frustrating. It drives them crazy. It's like, just get to the point. And yet for other people, that's how they enjoy it. They enjoy the process along the way of kind of wandering around. I myself relate to a more circular approach than a linear approach. And so for me, when I look at how I'm going to present Nichiren's writings, I try to take it all apart and put it back together in a different way that, to me, makes sense. And hopefully it will for you as well. So if you find yourself challenged reading Nichiren's writings, don't worry. Many people do. It may be just a discovery of how you relate to logical processes. I believe that there's many logical approaches that are logical. All right, so we're back to the beginning of this session, and this is the refutation of the Zen school. So in the basic Zen doctrine, that they believe that the Dharma was transmitted outside the realm of the sutras, that there was a mind-to-mind transmission. And so, they refute the reliance on teachings. In other words, what the Buddha, in other words, that the Buddha never revealed his enlightenment or cause within the sutras. So the Buddha, all the stuff in the sutras that talk about enlightenment and all of that isn't the real revelation. That the real revelation of enlightenment occurs mind to mind, outside of the text or the words of the sutra. And they, as proof of this, or their belief, is that when the Buddha passed Kashyapa a flower, and Kashyapa smiled, that this was, in fact, the secret transmission that occurs from mind to mind. It's kind of interesting that of all the publications, or of all the denominations, Zen has probably the largest amount of books written by and on Zen, about a denomination that believes that everything is outside of words. So it's kind of something that is, I think, a little humorous. I've even have some friends of mine that practice Zen, and they too admit that that is sort of a paradox. Okay, so Nichiren says that from the perspective of the Lotus Sutra, that that this can't be so, because then that would deny the truth of the Buddha's words. Buddha says precisely, teaching the only way by which the Lotus Sutra is the precise teaching by which the precise teaching by which all bodhisattvas attain enlightenment. The Buddha says that it's the Lotus Sutra. So we'd have a contradiction. We'd have the Buddha telling a lie if enlightenment occurs outside the context of sutras, because the Buddha says in the Lotus Sutra that this is the way to attain enlightenment. Also, the transmission from the Buddha to Bodhisattva superior practices when the Bodhisattvas from underground arose, that would make that transmission false. And yet, in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha specifically gives to Bodhisattva superior practices and all of the Bodhisattvas from underground the specific mission to spread the Lotus Sutra, to teach the Lotus Sutra, and to demonstrate the truth of the Lotus Sutra by their own enlightenment. So, again, Nichiren is saying that if we believe in the Lotus Sutra, as he does, and as we ourselves state that we do, or claim that we do, if we believe in the Lotus Sutra, then the teaching that transmission occurs outside of the sutra would be false. That's our belief. Now, I will say that over time, and I could be completely wrong. That's always a possibility. But I'm less dogmatic. I'm less fundamental about this. I believe that there is a truth in Zen, and in all the denominations. I believe that there is a truth. I am not of the mind that they are doomed and going to hell just because they don't chant the Odaimoku. I'm a little bit more open to the inclusion of many paths, of many truths. Perhaps that's a result of my life experience. Well, I'm sure it's a result of my life experiences. But I also believe that this is a shift in our culture that is taking place. And for many people, this is troubling. Many people don't know what to do with the fear that what they believe is not the only absolute truth. And this may be part of our cultural shift, our cultural conversation, our cultural dilemma, that that truth is much more expansive than I believe than any one single statement, belief system, or whatever. That there are many approaches. Just as I began this lecture, this series tonight, or this lecture tonight, that with the many different ways of constructing a story, many different ways of logically approaching something, that my logic is not necessarily the way you approach logic. And I think that as we look at humanity, as we look at ourselves, that when we do so with an open and expansive mindset that welcomes many different possibilities, I think we become greater as a society and as people. And in a way, I think our religious belief, our spiritual practice becomes stronger rather than weaker. I know a lot of people, when they're challenged with when their superiority is challenged, they become fearful, they become defensive, and they just build the castle walls up higher, if you will, and thicker. and that just leads to more isolation. That doesn't lead to discovery. And so I think that for me, my experience has been that the more I'm challenged, um, the I think the better I become. I hope so. Anyway, I like to think so. All right, so let's go on, and we'll go to the next slide. Maybe is anything that's not changing on my screen? So let me check in with you there, Brandon. If you're still with me, I can't see the attendees, but did you see the slideshow change?
Yes, it changed.
Okay, good. I know at one point it didn't. All right. To the folks that are watching the recording of this, I apologize for that little timeout there, but I have recorded these and then the slides didn't change, and I want to make sure. All right. The next one we come to is Shingon. Here we see an image of Bodhisattva Fudo, one of many of these kinds of images. Bodhisattva Fudo is the main deity in Shingon School. My I had an art history teacher once say, okay, so you see the hands, the way the hands are positioned in this particular deity. One finger, the index finger, is gripped by the fingers of the other hand. She used to call this the sexy mudra. Um, I'll leave you to think about that for a moment, but we've got an insertion going on there. So no offense intended by my irreverence, but just pass that on. I also think that, in fact, I was reading an article today that one of the signs of a more mature faith is humor and opening oneself up to laughter. And not be so rigid in one's faith. That's the way I teach. That's what I encourage people to begin to try to approach for themselves, is a looseness. Looseness for me is not sloppy, but looseness is saying, I'm comfortable. Sort of like, I don't know, a lot of people are comfortable in suits. I find suits too constrictive. For me, give me a big, baggy, worn out flannel shirt and a pair of blue jeans, and I'm in heaven. So this kind of looseness, this kind of comfort, this kind of assurance, this kind of confidence that yeah, I can laugh at this and I still believe it. All right, so I'm kind of rambling all over. Talk about circular tonight. I'm really circular. All right, the Shingon school teaches that the one vehicle teaching leading to bodhisattvahood, they teach the one vehicle teaching, that's capital letters, one vehicle, the one vehicle teaching leading to bodhisattvahood, and thereby negating the teaching applicable to the people of the two vehicles, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. So Shingon emphasizes, I guess you could say, good works, bodhisattva, doing things for other people. This is the bodhisattva practice. Exclusively, only, and this runs contrary to the people. This leaves out the people who are the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, the contemplatives and the learners. And it further further to set themselves apart, they incorporate finger signs and mantras. So we have Shingon is an esoteric practice. It's an esoteric school, and so they have a lot of these magical symbols, hand gestures, and I was reading this years ago, and pardon my vagueness. But Buddhism has kind of gone through in and out of phases of magic, if you will, or esoteric practices. At first, Buddhism was not esoteric. Then, in particular, when Buddhism came into China and had to compete with some of the esoteric practices or esoteric teachings in the Chinese culture in particular, Buddhism began to incorporate esoteric practices so that they would look good in comparison to the popularity of the other esoteric religions or magic practices. So in a sense, it's kind of like a one-upsmanship. And esoteric practices began to slowly be adopted by all schools of Buddhism over time. So we even have esoteric practices in Nichiren Buddhism. And yet, there are many people who don't understand why or where they came from. I mean, on the mandala, there are two esoteric deities on there, Fudo and Aizen. And that's the little snaky-like things on the outside, left and right edges that are in the middle on the outside. So it's not real clear why Nichiren included these two esoteric deities, but they're there. And so, Buddhism has, I believe, successfully merged esoteric practices and not so esoteric practices. And Shingon almost exclusively relies on esoteric practices. I'll tell you, when you go to an esoteric service or an esoteric practice, it's pretty, impressive. It's a good show. With the magicians in Las Vegas, it's a pretty entertaining attraction. So in the Lotus Sutra, we have the teaching of the three vehicles into one, and that it's not any one singular of the three learners, contemplatives, or bodhisattvas, the doers of good works, but it's all three of them. And I kind of, maybe this is heresy what I'm going to say now, but so be it. I'm a heretic. But I think that as I think about the Lotus Sutra, and this isn't a scholarly conclusion, it's just more of a stepping back and looking and seeing how I feel, or seeing what is tugged within me, or what story begins to pop up. And I am a storyteller of sorts, and I look for stories. And the Lotus Sutra is being taught at the conclusion of the Buddha's life. And the Sangha has grown quite large and diverse. It's spread, to a large portion of India. Many people in it. Lots of different personalities are coming together now. A lot of people from different cultures. So, just as the United States is not a singular culture, we have little different pockets of culture all over the United States. Every country is the same way. So here we are at the end of the Buddha's lifetime of teaching, and lots of people are coming into the Sangha and practicing Buddhism, and we have a lot of different personalities interacting together, and as it's happened throughout all of history, different personalities mean different things are happening. So the Buddha's looking at his Sangha, and his Sangha is no longer homogenous, if you will. So, there's little cliques, I imagine, little camps of people feeling superior, if you will. So we've got this one group over here that thinks that they understand the Buddha's teachings and they know what to do, and there's another little group over here on the other side of the basketball court, and they think that they know the best way to play the game, and they've got the best strategy. And but everybody has the same coach. And imagine, if you will, a team that's going to play same coach, but different parts of the team are have different practice philosophies or different approaches to playing the game. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to manage that. So the Buddha's kind of stepped back. The coach of the basketball team's kind of stepped back and kind of looked at things, and maybe scratched his chin and said, what are we going to do here? Everybody's partially right. How do I get each of these different approaches to accept each other and to understand that there are many subtle ways to attain enlightenment. And so, I'm thinking, okay, well, he says, learning is important, study is important, and yet not everybody is inclined to be scholarly or academic. And so we need to honor both of those possibilities, that study is important and not everybody can do it. Self-contemplation, the contemplatives, the ones who went off by themselves and meditated and attained enlightenment. That's certainly an important practice too. I'm thinking the Buddha's looking at that and says, that's good. They understand, and yet not everyone can do that. And then he looks over at the other side where the people are doing all the good works, and he said, these people are really quite remarkable, and they have a great sense of dedication, and they have compassion for other people, and that's really wonderful, and that's what Buddhism is. And yet, not everybody can do that. And if we think about the teaching of the 10 worlds, we're not just one thing. We're many things at different times. And so the Buddhist, this is all hypothetical. The Buddha steps back and says, okay, well, how about we do it this way, folks? We have the one objective, which is enlightenment or winning the game. Why don't we try to step back from our entrenched positions and understand that there is a truth in each of these ways, and there is a need for each of the different ways. And the fundamental truth is enlightenment, is Buddhahood. Buddhahood is our objective, it's our core self, if you will. That's the important thing. And we are complete in our practice when we can engage in both contemplation, study, and doing good works, if you will. So, in a way, I think that the Lotus Sutra may, and as I said, I could be completely wrong. This could be heresy, but I don't think so. I think there might be a truth to it that in a way, this is the Lotus Sutra is a teaching that's trying to deal with differences in Buddhist practice and the differences that occur in a sangha. And if we look at the history of the Lotus Sutra, not being actually recorded until long after the Buddha's lifetime, then that would certainly make sense. That this is part of a Mahayana work. This is a Mahayana teaching that is, in a sense, justifying its existence. The Mahayana school split from the Theravadan school. Those practitioners who feel that priests, the ordained, the priesthood should be out in society, should be rubbing shoulders with the common man, if you will, and not be in a monastery. So, that was the first split. And, the Lotus Sutra is both defending and making a logical statement that this is true, that there is all of these aspects, that we need everything. So that's just my guess. So the Shingon school honors the one vehicle of Bodhisattva. And Nichiren is saying that it's all three. It's all right. So hopefully I didn't muddy that water too much. All right. Now we come to the prime practicer of the Lotus Sutra in the latter age of degeneration. I've encountered, not many, but I've encountered a few people who claim that they revere and honor the Lotus Sutra, but Nichiren has nothing to do with it, that they're not Nichiren Buddhists, they're not practitioners of Nichiren anything. And I'm always a little bit, I think to myself, okay, well, what does that look like? how do you get to a practice of the Lotus Sutra without Nichiren? I guess it could be possible, and I don't think that Nichiren himself is necessarily the important aspect. What my question is where, if you don't accept Nichiren and you don't like the guy and you want to have nothing to do with him, that's okay. In that case, though, who will be the representative who appears that proclaims the supremacy of the Lotus Sutra? Who is, in other words, Bodhisattva superior practices? It seems to me that in order for the truth of the Lotus Sutra to be verified, or to have some sort of logical conclusion that the truth of the Lotus Sutra is, that you need all the elements. You need a Bodhisattva superior practices. You could have, it could be anybody. I mean, I'm open to discovery of someone who has practiced as Bodhisattva superior practices in some other belief system. To my knowledge, there's only been one person so far that has put forth the effort, who has lived a life that could represent, or could be looked at as equaling that of Bodhisattva superior practices. Now, in some Nichiren denominations, they might phrase this a little bit differently and say that Nichiren is Bodhisattva superior practices, and then therefore becomes the leader. Since Bodhisattva superior practice is the leader of the Bodhisattvas from underground, then somehow or another that gets convoluted to being the true Buddha. And in Nichiren Shu, we take the position that Nichiren was not the reincarnation of Bodhisattva superior practices, but Nichiren's life manifests. So Nichiren, in a sense, becomes the spokesperson for Bodhisattva superior practices, the emissary, the emulation of Bodhisattva superior practice. So Nichiren's life looked like Bodhisattva superior practices, and that's our position in Nichiren Shu, that we don't have a reincarnation going. We have Nichiren lived his life in a way that looked like, or that would have been, Bodhisattva superior practices. He fulfilled the things that needed to be done. Could anyone else do it? I suppose so. No one else has, to my knowledge. And so we're left with Nichiren right now, the way things are here in 2015, that Nichiren so far is the first and only person that has emulated or has lived a life that looked like Bodhisattva superior practices. And so in order for the Lotus Sutra story to be complete in any other way, we would need a replacement figure. And that's why I find it difficult to come to a logical conclusion that you could be a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra without Nichiren. I'm okay. I mean, I'm open to someone else bringing another candidate forward. But there has to be someone, I think. Without Bodhisattva superior practices, then we have no leader for the Bodhisattvas from underground or beneath the earth. So we need somebody to model our lives upon, and that is Nichiren. Nichiren states, I have never seen or heard of any man or knowledge who recited Namu Myoho Renge Kyo himself and advised others to do so during the 700-year period between the reigns of Emperor Kimei, when Buddhism was introduced to Japan, and the last emperor, ... Consider what I said above. I, Nichiren, undoubtedly am the prime practicer of the Lotus Sutra in Japan. End of quote. So Nichiren is saying that in all of the time, so let me back up here. He's already come to a logical conclusion, laid out his logical argument that the Lotus Sutra, that Buddhism, the focus of Buddhism, is now in Japan, according to the Buddha's according to the Lotus Sutra, when the Buddha says that this Lotus Sutra will be the primary teaching in this latter age, this fifth 500-year period. And Nichiren has already proven that that's the Lotus Sutra. He's already come to the logical conclusion that the most appropriate teaching is the Lotus Sutra. He's already come to the logical conclusion that the most appropriate age is now. And he's already come to the logical conclusion that the most appropriate location is Japan. And now he's saying that in all of the time that Buddhism has been present in Japan, from when it was first introduced to now, there hasn't been anybody who has come forth and said that we should practice the Lotus Sutra and chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo and taught others to do the same. We do have in the history of Japan, we do have the chanting of the Odaimoku before Nichiren's time. Primarily, it was reserved as a deathbed practice. So as one was dying, the objective was, or the goal was, that as one was dying, one would chant the Lotus Sutra. And this would transition one from this life to the next life. But it was an auxiliary or ancillary practice to an individual's other Buddhist practice. What Nichiren did is he was the first person to proclaim the singularity, the superiority, the supremacy of just chanting Odaimoku. And so before Nichiren, no one had done it, and he's saying that. Also, he said that no one has endured the persecutions. No one has been harassed to the degree that Nichiren had been just for chanting the Odaimoku. There have been other Buddhists who have been harassed, but they had not been harassed because they were teaching the Lotus Sutra. And that's an important distinction that Nichiren makes, is that in the Lotus Sutra and elsewhere, it says that people who try to teach the Lotus Sutra in this age of degeneration will be persecuted with sticks and staves and tile pieces, just as Bodhisattva Never Despised was. And so, while others may have been persecuted for their Buddhist practice, up to this date, it was only Nichiren who was persecuted because of his practice of the Lotus Sutra. So, in many ways, if we look at Nichiren's life, and we can see that he's not necessarily, I don't feel anyway, that it's any statement of self-aggrandizement, but more of simply just a matter of fact. This is what I have done. This is what I have experienced, and draw your own conclusions. He doesn't go around. I've never felt that he's gone around necessarily bragging about all of these things. There are other people who have a different feeling about it, but my feeling is that it's just simply stating the facts. If I state that I graduated from high school, went to college, took 40 years, but I went to college and graduated, became an ordained priest at Nichiren Shu. Then went on to complete training to become a board-certified chaplain. I mean, those are just facts. They're not facts that are greater than your life story, but they are facts of my life story. Now, if I maybe said it a little bit differently and say, and when I graduated from high school, I was pretty sharp person, and then start inflating my story, or start somehow or another implying that my story is better than your story, then that becomes, I think, bragging. That becomes an egotistical statement. Then it becomes about me over you, which is, what an egotistical person is really all about. It's that I'm better than you, and I can prove it in many different ways. But Nietzsche doesn't say that. I've never gotten the feeling that Nichiren is saying, I did all these things, look how great I am. He's just saying, I did all these things. These things happened to me. And what are we going to do with that? All right. So enough of that. I'm just sharing with you some of my passions, some of my feelings, my spirit, um, and how I interpret this. And everybody is certainly free to come to their own conclusions and disagree with me. Great. All right. So a big point for Nichiren in all of his life was why why have all these bad things happened to Japan? Um, a lot of calamities. This was the motivation for writing the Rishoran Kokoran, which we will begin to study in July next month. It was a motivating factor for his immersion into studying all the Buddhist texts to try to come up with a reason or an explanation for why Japanese people were suffering so much. This Buddhist country was suffering. So anyway, he says here, said in the Sutra of the Golden Splendor, the quote is, "When evil men were regarded highly, and good men were persecuted, constellations as well as rains and winds all went out of control." End of quote. So he says, if this passage is correct, then there are undoubtedly evil men in Japan. So if bad things are happening, and the reason bad things happen is because evil people are elevated and good people are persecuted. And let me see if I can explain this whatever way logically. So, got bad things happening. Life is really sucking hard, and you look around, and if life is, if bad things are happening, who are we? Who are we revering? Who are we respecting? Who are we holding up? And if it's evil people and good people are being diminished or persecuted, then we have a problem, and maybe we ought to reverse things. And there are in Japan at this time, there were good people in Japan, and Nichiren is putting forth that he is one of those good people, and he is being hated and persecuted. And even if he's not the only good person, that there were many people who were being persecuted. And so if the good people are being persecuted and the bad people are being revered and elevated, then we have no protective influence over deities and natural phenomena. That there's no, sort of like, if you leave home and you leave all your doors unlocked and don't turn on the burglar alarm, not that burglar alarms prevent burglaries, but if you leave home and leave all the windows open and the doors unlocked and you're gone for a long time, almost inevitably in some places you will be robbed. And Nichiren is saying that when we elevate the bad people and persecute or demean the good people, that we are in a sense leaving our house unguarded and we have no protection. And this is one of the conclusions that he comes to when he writes the Rishoran Kokoran. And he's, just further re-emphasizing that. So we have the predictions, and of the predictions that Nichiren finds in the sutras when he studies to write the Rishoran Kokoran. By this time in the Senji Sho, the only prediction that had not occurred was, I'm sorry, there were two that had not occurred yet at this time. And they were that Japan was to be invaded by foreigners and that there would be a civil war. And sometime after, I don't have my dates handy, but it wasn't too long after this that the Mongols announced that they were going to send a huge fleet to invade Japan. And I don't know if you've are into watching over the top Japanese acting as part of their. I mean, that's just part of their artistic culture. Um, but from an American perspective, at least from my perspective, it's way over the top, and that is why to get a hold of the DVD Nichiren and the Mongol Invasion. It's a long movie. I think it's about 2.5, maybe even 3 hours long, um, and it's interesting. Um, hopefully maybe you can get a copy of it and be entertained by it. But we see in there that Japan is getting ready for the invasion, and there's no way that I believe that Japan could have won, except for the fact that the Mongol fleet is sunk, and the movie definitely attributes that to Nichiren's chanting. And you should see the way he emotes as he's chanting the Odaimoku to ward off the Mongol invasion. Interesting. The Mongol invasion actually, while while the invaders were defeated, it did set off a chain of events that caused the Civil War. The Japanese country, the economy really suffered in their hasty preparation to defeat the Mongols. People became fearful, and wartime economies are out of control oftentimes, and everything gets all haywire. Which may be one reason why even our own economy right now is bad. I mean, one of many reasons is that basically we are on a wartime economy. All of our money is going to military expenditures, and we don't see it because it doesn't look like war. It doesn't feel like war. All right. So the two predictions eventually come true. So Nichiren's quite the fortune teller, and in a way, this comes back to one of my beliefs that if we understand cause and effect, if we really, really understand cause and effect, then we can, to a certain degree, I believe, predict the future, because we will just know to a certain degree that if this is done, then this other thing happens. All right. I'm getting ready to wrap it up here. Nichiren, quoting from the Senji Sho, just as a royal emissary, skillful in talking and dealing, is sent to a foreign land and carries out the royal order even at the cost of his own life by stating the king's words without concealing them. Likewise, wise men should expound the Mahayana teaching secretly held by the Buddha, namely that each person possesses the Buddha nature in him. This should be expounded among ordinary people, even at the cost of life. So, as an ambassador, goes before a foreign court in a foreign country and states his ruler's words without fear for his life. So too should we become ambassadors to the truth of everybody possessing the potential to become Buddhas. That we all possess the Buddha nature. We should be ambassadors to this truth, to speak without fear, and share this message that this is what our practice in a way boils down to, is enabling other people to wake up to the truth that lies deep in their heart, that lies within themselves. And we our own self practice is chanting the Odaimoku. That is our personal practice, but our greater bodhisattva practice, bodhisattva from beneath the ground. Our greater bodhisattva practice is just being and sharing enlightenment with everyone. It doesn't say in there that it's not about converting people. And I think this is a really important point, is that this doesn't say how many people you converted. This doesn't even talk about how many people were influenced. That doesn't matter. What matters is that we live in such a way as to demonstrate that it is possible for anyone to attain enlightenment through the practice of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. So I leave you with that thought as we almost conclude our lecture on Senji Sho. As I said at the beginning, hopefully it got recorded, that the next study, the next session, the final section on this Senji Sho will be on Shoju and Shakabuku. And hopefully I will be able to tie in some of the little points that I've talked about tonight, about expansiveness, about the understanding of, or at least my belief, that there are many ways on this path, and they, I believe, are all in a sense tied together and summed up by Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I've said before that I think that there are many ways to attain enlightenment, and they may be applicable to a certain group of people or a certain type of practitioner or certain educational level of education. However, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is not the only way, and I don't believe that that's ever what's been said. I think Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is the universal way. So anybody, rich, poor, smart, dumb, great looks or ordinary looks, wonderful, fantastic talents or mediocre or limited talents, long attention span, no attention span, great ability to think and to be present and meditate. And for the antsy, anxious person that just cannot sit still, that Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is a way that all of these people can absolutely be guaranteed of attaining enlightenment. It's I think the one unifying, the one universal principle that anybody can use, but not the only exclusive practice. So I'll leave you with that. And I'm going to check in on the attendance monitor. It looks like Brandon is still here and Neil has joined us. So let me change the slide here to the title slide and take a few moments here. I ran a little bit longer because Brandon and I chatted for a few minutes before we began. But I open it up now to any thoughts, comments. Brandon is muted. I don't know if he's still with us. Let me see if I can see.
Yeah, I'm here, Russo.
Okay, great. And Neil has joined us probably by phone. Thoughts, comments? I am recording this, so yeah. Any thoughts or comments?
Okay, yeah, I actually had a thought. Going back to the beginning when you were talking about the Zen school, I I thought what was very interesting was, and I don't think I don't believe you actually mentioned this, but it was just a thought that I had, being that that was the first, essentially the first slide that we were talking about, um, or that was shown. Um, what's interesting is, uh, as far as Shakyamuni is concerned, when he attained his enlightenment, he actually, I mean, as far as all of the material that I've read and whatnot, I don't ever recall Shakyamuni attaining enlightenment or Buddhahood by way of chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Um, what I what I have experienced or what I have seen is Shakyamuni uh, in various meditative states, as well as in his great samadhi, as it's called. Um, and I just find uh, that I think, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I actually had a little bit of a thought or perhaps a desire to look into Zen, um, just because I felt that, well, if I'm able to really master Zen or really be able to achieve the discipline that it takes. Um, I was just wondering if that would perhaps strengthen or heighten my ability to practice Nichiren's Buddhism. I don't know. Maybe it's not necessary that I practice Zen, but that was just a thought that I had. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question. I think it's great that you're thinking about this kind of thing. Um, yeah, historically speaking, the Buddha never chanted Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Okay, he never vocalized those words. What we believe, and one of the conclusions that Nichiren draws in the Lotus, in Senji Sho, as he's talking about the Lotus Sutra, is that this this principle of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, or the concept of Lotus Sutra, if you will, has existed in many forms, in many places in the universe, in many times distant past and times yet to occur. That there is this fundamental, this essence, this mustard seed, if you will, of Buddhism called the Lotus Sutra, and that in the chapter in Bodhisattva Never Despise, we have I forget what it's, 26, 24 character Lotus Sutra. So for us, the Lotus Sutra practice is 7 characters. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. For Bodhisattva Superior Practice, it was like 26 characters. There's other examples given in the Lotus Sutra of huge, thousands and thousands of volume Lotus Sutras. Ours is 28 chapters. So there are many ways that the Lotus Sutra manifests. And what the Buddha has done in the Lotus Sutra is reveal this Lotus Sutra teaching, even though it was already in his heart, it was already in his mind, but it was not a teaching that was appropriate to the disciples and to the time in his lifetime. So it had not become, it had not become, if you will, the time had not become right to actually teach the Lotus Sutra until the Buddha teaches the Lotus Sutra. But it was always there. There's that fundamental truth. Now that could be just hogwash. That just could be, somebody's rational approach or somebody's, clever argument. I think that, back to your question about whether your practice would be improved by incorporating or by being a better meditator or having the practice that you think that a Zen practitioner has. Great, no harm if you can do it. Not everybody can. One classic example that's given by myself and many other people is the single mother that's working 2 jobs and trying to care for a child. Silent meditation just really isn't practical a lot of times. To set aside the time for long meditative experiences and practices. And this is one of the reasons why Nichiren and some of his contemporaries taught this single mantra, this phrase practice, if you will, this chanting practice, is that the fisherman or the farmer, if you will, could practice and attain enlightenment, even though they didn't have maybe the skill to read the sutras themselves, even though they didn't have the time to devote to an exclusive practice of meditation. And if you think back to what I had said about trying to bring the entire Sangha back together again and a unifying principle, and in a way, that's what the Lotus Sutra is. It's not a practice that excludes any other thing. I think there may be some schools, or were some times in different schools' histories, that said absolutely not. We don't have anything to do with anything that looks like Zen. But that would be inaccurate. I mean, meditation is always a part of Buddhism. Chanting is meditation. Just looks different than silent sitting. Singing can be meditation. Playing basketball can be meditation. I know when I used to run a printing press, there were many times when I achieved a state of heightened meditation, being in rhythm, being so tuned in to what I'm doing. And you, as a father, I'm certain, have experienced moments of profound connection, profound meditation, if you will, that didn't look like sitting underneath a tree. So, the point is whatever you can do that enhances your practice, do it. Now, if you're trying to do something and it is inhibiting or limiting your practice, then by all means stop, because we don't want to inhibit our practice. We want to do things that make it grow, that nourish it. So if you're thinking that your practice will absolutely be better if you do lots of Zen meditation, and then you find that 6 weeks into this whole thing, it's just not working, and you keep beating yourself up because, well, it should be working because it's supposed to work, and why is it working? And if you just let that go and be at peace with what works for yourself. And part of why I celebrate you asking this question is that you're examining your life. You're opening yourself up to some exploration, opening yourself up to discovering what works for you, who you are, how you connect with the Dharma. And not about me and how I connect, but how you connect. And that's wonderful. We can't do any better than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Wonderful. All right, Neil, you want to chime in? Or I don't know if you're in a situation where you can. Let me see if I can see the chat window here. It's a lot to digest, and this is one of Nichiren's weightiest works. Indeed. Let's see, what were you saying before that? All right. It's still stuck here. Oh, there we go. All right, so I guess you're talking about the slides. And, just verifying that we were seeing slides. By the way, what are you all seeing on your screen right now? What are you seeing?
I see myself, you, and the altar.
Okay, all right. We'll see if that comes through on the recording. Again, I'm still trying to discover what results I get when I do certain things. So, Neil, let's see. It's a lot to digest. Yes, indeed it is. And by the way, can you share how, I was talking about the slides. Now I see just, yeah, okay. So you're on your mobile device, and I think the iPhone still does not yet show the cameras. I know my Android does show the cameras, but I don't think the iPhone yet shows the video stream. Just briefly, and then we'll wrap it up here. Neil, can you share even briefly how things went for you today on your second phone interview? And don't say anything too personal or identifying here, because this is being recorded. Things went well. Wonderful. All right. Well, then you and I can maybe go into a little bit more detail on that when I'm not recording. Final thoughts? comments?
Um, really nothing at this point,
Okay.
Russo. I enjoyed the lecture just like I enjoy all of the lectures,
Okay.
and and I just I I appreciate you and your time. Thank you.
Of course. Yes, my pleasure. And hopefully I'm not too confusing to listen to, because I do ramble about round, but maybe that's the liberties.
That's okay.
Okay,
That's
wonderful.
okay.
Tell your wife thank you very much for allowing you to watch the entire presentation tonight, and tell her that I wish her well as she does her homework and her job, whatever she needs to do on the computer, and I extend my appreciation to her as well. All right, so let
Thank you
us
very
go
much.
ahead and close out tonight, and let me mute everybody so we don't get a kind of a feedback loop here going on. But I'm going to chant Odaimoku 3 times together, and then we'll close it out. Thank you for joining tonight. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you very much. And let's see, we got a final comment from Neil. Said, I like the series. I've always wondered what other priests from other sects would say about Nichiren's characterization and so on. And some of it didn't come through. But we'll close it out. For those who will be watching on the Ustream YouTube video, thank you for watching. And anytime that anybody would like to make a donation to the temple, please feel free to do so using the PayPal link on the temple's webpage and on my blog page. And again, thank you and have a wonderful evening. Bye.